I've spent 30 years as an external and an internal consultant. And what I know is that consultants get hired to solve problems. But what they actually do boils down to seven repeatable moves. It's the same stuff. Whether it's analyzing data, documenting chaos, or comparing vendors, consultants have a playbook. This video breaks it down. If you've ever wondered what consultants really do between other than making slides, you're about to find out. So let's get into it. Consultants solve problems that companies can't or don't want to solve themselves. They bring frameworks or structures, outside perspectives, known for PowerPoints and jargon like circling back and touching base, ducks in a row. They're often hired to validate what leaders already believe. They're famous for spending long hours, and I can attest to that in my 20s, short deadlines, polished deliverables. Ultimately, they do these seven things. So, what is it? Well, they analyze, and I'll just say stuff. They document stuff. They compare stuff. They optimize stuff. They restructure stuff. They develop stuff and they test stuff. Pretty much you can put everything that they do into one of those seven buckets. So let's unpack each of those using my consultant terms. First, analyze stuff. Consultants are very often asked to assess a situation. I think this is the most basic thing that consultants do, whether it's digging into messy data to find patterns or interviewing stakeholders, mapping processes, right? Current state process, target state process, doing financial analysis and testing scenarios, predicting models, what if scenarios, turning these qualitative chaos into structured insights, and asking why again and again and again until somebody gets uncomfortable or maybe they get an answer. The goal really is to turn ambiguity into insights so leaders can make informed decisions. Now, how do they do that? Well, lots of different ways. There's dashboard maybe nobody uses when the project ends. There's lots of surveys and interviewing and collecting of information to confirm what people already know. You can slice the data lots of different ways with dashboards and PowerPoints. There's all sorts of frameworks that have big acronyms like a SWOT analysis or the five whys or so on. There's benchmarking against companies that you maybe never heard of. Maybe they exist, maybe they don't, and really presenting it in a way that sounds more complex than it probably is. So, analyzing is the most basic thing consultants do. The second is they document stuff. Clients rely on consultants to capture and organize information that's all over the place. Most companies don't document things, they don't have things consistent, and they certainly don't have it in one place. So, whether that's requirements from stakeholders or process flows and swim lane diagrams, they create meeting notes that are the official record. They're templates, trackers, logs, right? There's no shortage of Excel lists that track things, documenting decisions, and essentially turning this chaos into organized, searchable artifacts, which is especially important in the world of AI where information and documentation needs to be in one place. Well, why is this important? It ensures alignment, it reduces ambiguity, it helps them understand their own processes. And again, this sounds simple, but people don't write things down. And so when you go to understand what somebody does, it's just not there. It's in people's heads. So this creates that paper trail. It makes consultants look organized and indispensable when, it's my favorite consulting term that the consultants will look at your watch to tell you what time it is. All we're essentially doing is writing down what people already know but didn't write down. And again, it's important because of AI. The third thing, we compare stuff. We help clients evaluate options, whether that's vendors, tools, strategies, whatever, by structured comparison. And there's different criteria and models you can use across that. There's scoring and weighted frameworks where you identify trade offs and risks, pros and cons, recommending the best fit. And it's essentially translating those differences into the business impact. And how do they do that? Well, there's lots of ways, right? If you're comparing vendors, maybe there's RFPs and managing the vendor demos. If it's comparing customer something or a product, maybe they interview those customers for feedback. There's the cost benefit analysis that says how much does something cost? What's the value you get in return? And is it worth it? There's maturity models and industry benchmarks and heuristics that you can use to compare. There's gap analysis, right? If you're doing process analysis between the current and future state. And generally, there's a final recommendation that's presented. And consulting 101 is you say stuff with confidence and people think you know what you're talking about. Number four, optimize stuff. When clients want to improve performance, we come in to streamline process, reduce cost, and boost efficiencies. And there's lots of ways we do that, whether it's improving efficiency, reducing waste, streamlining workflows and handoffs, automating repetitive tasks, especially now with AI coming in, reducing costs, ideally without hurting quality, although that rarely is the case, improving customer experience, increasing speed, accuracy, and throughput. So, all the buzzwords that consultants like to say we do. How do we do it? All sorts of techniques. You might have heard of Lean or Six Sigma. There's time studies of what people spend their time on. Workshops, so many workshops, process design workshops, and ideation sessions, and team building workshops, and so on. Dashboards to track the improvements. Then there's the quick wins or quote unquote low hanging fruit versus the long term stuff. And it really is delivering the return on investment that justifies paying the consultants the money. Four, we restructure stuff. We're often asked how to redesign how work gets done or how teams are organized. So, whether that's org charts, reporting structures, clarifying roles and responsibilities, and shifting work between teams, looking at governance and decision making if things are taking too long, ideally aligning that strategy, and the structure, and trying to reduce duplication and confusion. Some examples, whether it's new teams or functions, it's merging overlapping departments. Our favorite deliverable, the RACI for roles and responsibilities, establishing new roles, communication flows, and then there's the whole change management aspect. So we restructure stuff. We also develop stuff. We build stuff. And it could be, clients are looking to build new things, whether it's taking an idea and turning it into a plan, whether it's developing a system, whether it's developing a product. Consultants help move from vision to execution. So that's taking big, vague goals and turning that into structured components and frameworks, or having diverse stakeholder input into one strategy, iterating through drafts and prototypes if we're talking about a product or a solution, and again, more working sessions to co-create and pressure test those ideas. And some examples we've talked about: transformation plans, pilot programs, customer journeys, financial models, playbooks. Don't forget the polished presentations. There's, again, systems and applications and updates. So we develop and build a lot of different things. And if we're going to develop stuff, we also need to test stuff. So before scaling the solution, we help clients test it through pilots, proof of concepts, or user feedback. That means validating assumptions before rolling things out, pilots and proof of concepts, testing processes and systems to make sure they work, gathering feedback, again, back to KPIs and measuring performance indicators, and making sure that there's no issues before we scale. And there's lots of ways of doing that. There's A and B testing solutions, so scenario A, scenario B, controlled experiments, user testing. There's performance testing and stress testing and system testing, all sorts of testing, qualitative and quantitative feedback, and then ideally refining those solutions based on the results so that you deploy a good product. So here's the thing: consultants do all of these things. We analyze to understand problems, document to create clarity, compare to choose the best path. We optimize to improve performance and restructure to align the people and work. We develop solutions, we test them before scaling, and every single engagement has at least one and many of these items, and they just repeat across engagements. It's patterns. That's what led me to create this presentation. It seemed like the same thing over and over and over again. So, why do companies hire consultants? They want the outside perspective. It's fascinating that companies will trust something that somebody else says externally. And if somebody internally said the same thing, for some reason, it doesn't bring the same credibility. They lack the internal bandwidth. They want the expertise or specialized skills that consultants supposedly have. They want validation for decisions they're going to make so that they have some credibility. And there's lots of change, so they need help doing that. And you can see on the right, they just hand over the money to the consultants in return for some PowerPoints and some graphs and charts. So here's the summary. Consulting really is part science, part art, and part theater. And there's actually 7 types of things that define the consulting craft. And every project is a mix of these. And if you get into it, it's challenging, it's fast paced and impactful, and it always ends in a presentation. Let me know if you think I missed anything or if this was helpful, and thanks for watching.